Football's back.
I mean, how about a little enthusiasm, 5-0? Football is back, everybody, and guess what? We're back too. Welcome back to you, Shazier. I couldn't be more thrilled to be here, along with Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs. They're back. Jalen Hurts and his Eagles are going to try to get back to the Super Bowl. Aaron Rodgers moved to New York or New Jersey, one way or the other. Fantasy football is back, and maybe best of all, DeMar Hamlin is back with the Buffalo Bills.
And plus, do the college football top contenders have a QB problem? From Wondery, I'm Ryan Shazier.
And I'm Dave Damashek.
And this is Don't Call It a Comeback.
Don't call it a comeback. I've been waiting on this moment my whole life. Can't call it a comeback. Everybody to your feet, make arenas rise. Yeah, I'm saying from the left to right, we get it on tonight. We do it all, but we don't back down. Just give me one shot, one chance, I'ma take it. Fixing up the game, but these records I keep on breaking.
Shaq, I know Michael Smith is here today, but before we get into a little bit of talk about what's going down next weekend, college football is back.
Yeah, fantasy football drafts are nigh. We'll get into it with Michael Smith and talk some real football too with him. In the meantime, let's get into it, 5-0. Week 1 is upon us. Week 0 in the rearview mirror. So many juicy questions, but 3 of the top 4 teams in the country have questions at the sport. In all the sports, most important position, QB, with all these transfers and otherwise. Where are you coming down on Ohio State? They had a tough choice. They didn't ultimately really make it. They're saying both these kids are going to play.
Man, I think this is a really tough one. So I know a lot of people that are not inside the building are leaning for Devin Brown. But I know Kyle McCord, he's been there for a while. He's the older, the more savvy guy. So he's getting to start the Indiana game off, which is your Hoosiers. So we're going to see which one of the guys best fits when we play the tougher teams down the road. But honestly, if I had to pick, I think I'm choosing number 33 at quarterback, Devin Brown. But we're going to have to see in this first game.
You know, if people say the NFL is a quarterback league, and spoiler alert, it is, it's even more severe in college football. If you have a stud at that position, it can really cover up a lot of warts on the roster overall. And as I say, the irony is the perennial powerhouses in college football are the teams with the questions. And I'm talking about Bama, I'm talking about Ohio State, and this is in the era of NIL deals. We saw what it did for USC a year ago when Caleb Williams landed there. He got the Heisman 1 year ago. I think that the arrow is pointed up, relatively speaking, for Clemson. Yeah, they won the ACC a year ago, but the perception around Dabo and company is that they have fallen back a little bit over the last year or two when DJ Uiagalelei was supposed to be a Heisman candidate. Now he's in Oregon State playing in Corvallis. He's out of the way. Now they have the blue chipper, the 5-star stud, Cade Klubnik. Same goes for what's going on in Penn State with James Franklin, Drew Aller. I think there's a possibility for both those programs that it could be a little bit like what Andy Reid looked like before and after Patrick Mahomes. When you plug in a guy that talented into an already heavyweight program, really the sky's the limit. Undefeated seasons are a possibility. The Big Ten's going to be more rugged for Drew Aller and James Franklin, but I really think Clemson has a shot to run the table here, in large part because of Cade Klubnik making the scene in not the quarterback league, the quarterback nation.
I'm just going to have to disagree with you tremendously on this one. The reason I say that is because there's a reason that the top 3 national title contenders have no quarterbacks, because they understand that Georgia has 2 quarterbacks competing. Ohio State has 2 quarterbacks competing. And Alabama has 3 quarterbacks competing. With those 7 players, they understand that each one of those 7 players have the potential of winning a Heisman and leading their team to a championship. So all these other teams with their quarterback besides Caleb Williams, honestly, these other 7 could be ahead of all those other quarterbacks. So I can see what you're saying about Cade. He's a great player. About Drew, he's a great player. But there's a reason that the national polls put these 3 programs in the top 4 because they understand whichever one of these quarterbacks that the team decides on, they understand that this guy is a possible Heisman contender.
Boy, yeah, I mean, I think that's exactly right. You do have to adjust your eye if it's more attuned to pro football stuff. In the NFL, if your main man goes down, if he were to get hurt or otherwise, and you have to throw the backup in there, it's going to be a severe drop-off. To your point, the high-end programs, I'm talking about the 5 or 6 heavyweight programs in all the land. Yes, if the blue chip guy goes out, Bryce Young goes on to the NFL first overall draft pick, you can rest assured that Bama has not one, but multiple great options there. It doesn't, though, make up for the fact that these kids are 18 or 20 years old. There's a lack of experience. You're dropping them in to some big spots, SEC country, Big Ten or otherwise. It is a little bit uncomfortable to put those teams, to slot those teams in there at number 1 or number 2 in the nation when they have what is ultimately an unknown at the position. Talented, yes, but how they're going to handle everything that comes with being the starting quarterback of a big-time program has yet to be seen. And I do think that there's a chance for the true studs to emerge and carry their teams to some special places this year, sort of like what you saw with Caleb Williams at USC this year and how they've started this year as well.
Dave, one last thing I have to say before we get to the next portion. The one thing that's so exciting about this year of college football is there's only one guy that everybody truly knows is who won a Heisman. But now, pretty much everybody's just hoping and assuming and expecting their guy to do well. So you just never know. We might end up finding out who might be the next great college quarterback besides Caleb Williams.
Well, I mean, you say that we're expecting the next guy to be great. Not in Bloomington, Indiana, we're not. They're the Indiana
No, I was
Hoosiers
talking about the top 15. I was talking about top 15. I'm sorry about that.
I just wanted to make that clarification. Congratulations on your early season victory. This is what you do. You hurt people's feelings in Indiana right out of the gate. We can't have a few weeks to suspend reality and maybe be like 2-1, 3-0. No, we got to lose 68-0 or whatever it's going to look like on Saturday.
I think it would be 34-7 or something like that. I think it would be kind.
On behalf of all Hoosiers, I thank you in advance for that, Shazier. And now stay tuned for Michael Smith on Don't Call It a Comeback right after this break.
Don't call it a comeback.
Appreciate you joining us today.
Appreciate y'all having me.
Yeah, I've been on your show, so it's always been a good time. So we look forward to having a good time today. Yeah, so I'm gonna start off with fantasy a little bit. So what I'm gonna ask you first is, all right, I got a number 2 pick in fantasy draft. Everybody normally want a number 1 pick. Everybody normally want a number 1 pick. I got a number 2 pick, but I have a dilemma, and I'm gonna need your help. I'm in one of those legacy fantasy things, and the person behind me has the 3rd pick, but he has Austin Eckler as a restricted free agent. So if I don't make him pick Austin Eckler with a 3rd pick, he get him in the 2nd round or 3rd round, right? Do you understand it?
I think so. That's interesting. This is hardcore. Okay.
Yeah.
Hardcore.
So Austin Eckler is normally a 1st rounder, and he's right now this guy can get him in the 2nd or 3rd round. So I want to ask you, do you think I should basically take Austin Eckler and force him to draft him in the 1st round with the 3rd pick, or just say let him have both of them and get CMC or Justin Jefferson?
I get the strategy involved, Ryan, but I would say similar to in the actual NFL and for real football, whether it's intra-divisional or intra-conference trades, honestly, man, it's do what's best for your franchise. You know what I mean? And so I would take the player I want to take if I'm following the thought process here. So in redraft, I think it's Justin Jefferson and Christian McCaffrey would be your top 2. Since we're not talking dynasty, we're talking season long redraft. I would go Justin Jefferson or Christian McCaffrey, and I'd let him worry about his own Austin Eckler situation. I just take the guy that I need to take.
All right, bet. I just needed some reassurance.
Let's narrow it down a little bit further. Are we going running back? The entire offseason was consumed about whether or not you're supposed to pay running backs. Witness the fact that the 49ers, who can make anybody with a pulse look halfway decent running the ball, reminder, they went out of their way last year to get CMC. So it does show that there is a difference in pedigree, and even Kyle Shanahan wants that in his offense. Or do you go with the best receiver in football, Justin Jefferson? I'm going with the latter. How say you, Michael Smith?
I agree. Did they call you Double D? Is that your nickname? Is it Double D? No?
Sure.
Can I do that? Okay,
please. I'd like that.
Because it sounded like it was just rolling off my tongue. I agree, Double D. I like to think I invented zero running back, and I say that tongue in cheek. I didn't call it zero running back, but I've always felt, for fantasy purposes, and I think the actual NFL has long felt this way. It's really just coming to a head, to your point, and becoming more common knowledge. Parcells was a big don't draft a running back before the fourth round type guy. You know what I mean? There's a lot of teams, whether it's the Broncos under Shanahan back in the day, you mentioned Kyle Shanahan, that they use their system to generate a running game more than a specific running back. Fantasy wise, I just always felt the position was too volatile. And I always felt that you could get running backs later, or they would emerge on a waiver wire. So I've always been a receiver first guy. Any successful season I had, not coincidentally, was when I went receiver in the first couple of rounds in the snake draft, for example, or spend most of my money in an auction draft on receiver. So I'm with you. I'm taking either Justin Jefferson, or if you want, Jamar Chase. I don't think there's that much separation between the top two receivers.
Agree about that one as well. By the way, I also remember the names Clinton Portis, the real deal wherever he was in the NFL. Alandis Gary, less so when he goes away from Mike Shanahan's offense.
Yeah.
Now, a phenomenon when you try and blend fantasy and reality and they don't necessarily square is Anthony Richardson, I think, is a great pick for a quarterback this year. I don't know if he's going to be a winner in his first season. Dak Prescott, more established, obviously, ripe at this point. First of all, as a fantasy QB, do you like him in the top 5? And as a real QB, do you like him in the top 10 among QBs in the QB league?
You talking Richardson?
No, I'm sorry. I transitioned. I think Anthony Richardson is sort of the personification of a guy you want on your fantasy team, but not in real football this year. I think Dak Prescott is a guy who you probably want in fantasy. I'm not positive, if you're a Cowboys fan, how excited you are about Dak right now.
Yeah, spot on the Dak front. Fantasy, he's safe. You know his floor. It's a good offense. It's a great offense. He's going to put up numbers. You lay your head down at night and sleep well with Dak Prescott in your lineup. He's a set it and forget it quarterback, provided he stays healthy. In reality, I don't know that he's going to be the reason you win a Super Bowl. And worse than that, he might be the reason why you don't win the Super Bowl. And I like Dak a lot. I love his story. I like him as a quarterback, but you can't be both. The rest of your team can carry you there. Just don't lose the game. And we've seen that happen and make a few plays here and there. Jimmy Garoppolo got to a Super Bowl and had a 10-point lead and almost won a Super Bowl over Kansas City. Dak feels like a guy that not only is not going to be the reason you win it, but those mistakes pop up at the worst times for him. I know he's vowed to throw a few interceptions. I don't know if that's in his DNA. But on the Anthony Richardson point, Double D, I kind of disagree. I'm fascinated by him, and I'm biased because I got a chance to meet with him and talk to him at the Combine. I'm so impressed with him. And the fact that he was just named the starter, I love that move for the Colts because he needs to play. And I don't think that he's inexperienced, and yes, he's raw. I don't think those are bad things. I think he's got the tools, but more important, he's got the makeup. If you look at his backstory, you look at his journey, you look at just how he's conducted himself. I think he has the makeup, and you saw it in that first preseason game. They threw that awful pick and bounced back. He's got the makeup to deal with the bumps, the bruises, and the lumps and the struggles that rookie quarterbacks inevitably experience and learn from them quickly. You saw that his 1 year at Florida. He got better as the season went on and was not making the same mistakes. I think he has the ability to learn quickly, develop quicker than most people think. He could break fantasy, and I think he could revolutionize football. I said last year Justin Fields was the best running quarterback I've ever seen. That might be temporary. Anthony Richardson may take that crown very quickly.
Already.
Yeah.
I love the kid. I just think the football situation ain't great in 23. It's more of what the roster looks like, not what Anthony Richardson looks like. 24 and beyond, future's bright.
As you talk about young quarterbacks, man, I was about to ask you a question, but you brought his name up. He's a Buckeye. I love him to death. Justin Fields. Do you feel like taking quarterbacks early in fantasy is risky? Like first, second round?
No, especially not dual threat dudes like that. Like, I mean, you know, in Dynasty, it's all about quarterbacks. I'm more of a Dynasty player myself, and it's more about It's all about quarterbacks, especially being super flex and you're playing 2 quarterbacks. It's all about QBs. So you're taking those guys are flying off the board in startup drafts, and they're flying off the board in rookie drafts as they did this past year. In terms of redrafts or best ball, I don't think you take quarterbacks above the elite receivers or the elite 3-down type running backs, but there are exceptions. Mahomes is a lock for 5,000 yards in the being an MVP conversation. Jalen Hurts, Justin Fields, Lamar Jackson, Josh Allen, guys that could, you know, score touchdowns on the ground as well as can throw 30-plus touchdowns through the air. Or in the case of it specifically, your man Justin Fields, rush for 1,000 yards as a quarterback. Those guys are cheat codes, Konami codes as we call them, you know. And so you can find a cheat code quarterback and you love him. I just had a best ball draft a little while ago. I took Jalen Hurts in the 3rd round. Was it the 3rd round? Yeah, I want to say it might have been the 2nd round. Might have taken him in the 2nd round. So I took Saquon in the 1st. I might have taken Hurts in the 2nd because I really wanted the type of quarterback who could win me weeks.
Yeah, I understand that. So, but I'm gonna get back to the question that I had before. So, as we talk about young quarterbacks, we talked about guys like Dak who can. You're not sure he can win you a Super Bowl, but you can say he could be the reason that you lose a Super Bowl. The 49ers lost last year not because their quarterback wasn't good enough. It's because they ran out of him. Brock Purdy has locked up the starting job. What does that mean for the playmakers in San Francisco?
I'm a believer in Brock Purdy because the Niners are believers in Brock Purdy. I've also feel like I've seen this movie before, and I said this on Thursday Night Football last year up in Seattle, that it just reminded me, this was during the regular season, toward the end of the regular season. It just reminded me so much of the 2001 Patriots. That was the first team I covered out of college, and I saw Tom Brady not be the flashiest, but I saw him just galvanize that team and give that offense and that team a spark, similar to the way Brock Purdy did when he came in last year. I think we got to forget about where he was drafted. You know, on one hand, especially in fantasy and specifically dynasty, on one hand, we talk about the draft being an inexact science, and yet we hold where somebody was drafted against them, both in fantasy and reality. We can never shake from looking at somebody as mystery relevant. Well, maybe the league just missed on Brock Purdy. I think it's clear that they did. That same game at Seattle toward the end of the regular season, before the Thursday night game, I had a Niners executive tell me something that has really stuck with me when it comes to Brock Purdy. I said, how good is Purdy? He said, his floor is Ryan Fitzpatrick. His ceiling is Drew Brees. I'll take either one of those guys. Now, I know Ryan, who's my colleague at Thursday Night Football, and I'll take a lot of in between. Ryan is my colleague at Thursday Night Football. I think the world of him, played for a long time at a very high level, started for several teams. I know he didn't win it all, but he had some really good seasons and lasted for a long time. And obviously, we know Drew Brees is in the Hall of Fame. Anywhere between that, to answer your question, Ryan, is more than good enough. In Kyle Shanahan's system, maybe the best play caller in the NFL, in his system, from a fantasy standpoint, to get production out of Deebo Samuel and Brandon Ayuk and George Kittle and Christian McCaffrey, obviously. And from a reality standpoint, if he stays healthy, to get the Niners back to the Super Bowl.
The Lynch Shanahan regime is hard to turn your nose up. You got to have loved the last few years with those guys if you're a Niners fan, but it's hard to reconcile. Mr. Irrelevant Brock Purdy, scales of justice kind of balance it out. Those two guys wanted Trey Lance and used the 2nd overall pick to get him. It's wild, but that sort of faith is what happens here. It is a 60-40 proposition. If you're doing it well as a personnel guy in pro football, there are going to be a lot of misses.
Even the smartest guys don't have all the answers, right?
I'm not one of the smartest guys, but a year ago, if you would ask me, I was telling anybody who would listen, oh, Russell Wilson, you think he's not going to the Hall of Fame? What's wrong with you? Of course he's a Hall of Famer. consider me shook now. Where are you on Russell Wilson now with Sean Payton heading into this season? And a dicey, I mean, looks much thinner, but doesn't necessarily look like he did 5 years ago. How say you?
Where am I on Russell Wilson this season, or the Hall of Fame, or both?
Oh, just this season. Let's stick to that now. Maybe the goals are set too high right now.
It can't get any worse. So there's that. There's nowhere to go but up. It can't possibly get any worse. Let Sean Payton tell it. It will not get worse. I think what we realize is that Russell Wilson, and again, I'm a little biased, man, because if you want to talk about Russell Wilson, spend an entire season in a green room with Richard Sherman. I don't think he's as bad as we saw last year, and I don't think he's as good on his own as we thought he was in Seattle, if you follow me, when we thought he was on the fast track to the Hall of Fame. I think he was a beneficiary of not just a system, but an infrastructure in Seattle, organizational, whether that's coaching, whether that's a running game, whether that's a defense for all those years, and a certain way of doing things that masked his deficiencies. I don't think he's a type of quarterback the way I think, and we'll see, but I'm pretty sure Aaron Rodgers is, and he's about to show in New York. Tom Brady was from New England to Tampa. I don't think he's the type of quarterback that transcends his circumstances. So I think it's going to rely a lot on, is Denver's defense truly legit? Can they run the ball with Sean Payton's system and those running backs? Is that offensive line going to protect Russell Wilson? They have the receivers. They have some talent on defense. And they got some horses in the backfield, the Broncos do. If they can protect Russell, and with a play caller like Sean Payton, I think Russell Wilson can be good enough to get the Broncos to the playoffs. They could be the second best team in the AFC West.
Hey, some people look pretty, but hey, at the end of the day, they don't do what they need to do. The Browns, their team look pretty every single year, but it's just sometimes they just don't figure out how to, squeeze the juice out of it. So
yeah, I like the Chargers too, though.
Yeah, and that's what I feel about the Chargers. The Chargers, their team, the last few years, especially since Justin Herbert's been there, they've been in contention to make a lot of noise. And, I just don't know if they can finish it out and end up beating a Sean Payton Denver Broncos team. Because Sean Payton, the thing that's so great about that Denver Broncos team is they're such a young team. Obviously they have Russell, but everybody else on their team is a very young player that's developing their skill set and constantly getting better. And I think with that coach, they can all develop and be really good players.
How adaptable is Russell? Can he do what Sean Payton wants him to do? And can Sean Payton coach to Russell Wilson's strengths?
Because Sean Payton had Drew Brees for so long, now it's, hey, you have to figure out somebody different. You have to figure out somebody different. So I want to talk to you about two of the most polarizing players probably in my generation. Like, when I mean polarizing, I'm not saying that they were just the best the whole time, but their names are some of the biggest names in football since I've been playing. Lamar Jackson and Odell Beckham. Yeah. Both of them are two of the most well-known players throughout the sport of football. And it could be for two different reasons, but they both were. Do you think those two superstars together can help the Ravens figure their magic out this season and help them turn things around?
I know I'm talking to a former Steeler.
I'm not biased.
Well, because I was going to say there's no organization that I respect more than the Baltimore Ravens. There's just Steelers right up there. But it's just a certain organization that just typically just know what they're doing and you give them the benefit of the doubt. And they're there at the end year after year, one way or another. If the Ravens defense can stay healthy, they're going to always be a defensive team. And even with the change in offensive coordinator from an identity standpoint, they're going to run the football as long as John Harbaugh is the head coach. They're going to run the football. So they're going to, and Lamar's the quarterback, obviously. So they're going to run the football. And they're going to play great defense. The question is, now that they're giving him all this money, can Lamar Jackson, A, stay healthy and take the next step as a passer? And I don't think it's a huge step that he has to take, because I think he's a better passer than conventional wisdom is giving him credit for. I like what Todd Monken has done throughout his career. And I like that Todd Monken has empowered Lamar Jackson, giving him autonomy over the system. Sometimes, a change in coordinator or too many changes in coordinators and systems can hold a quarterback back in their development. Sometimes it's a breath of fresh air and it's just what they need. I think now that the contract situation is in their rear view, now they have an offensive coordinator who believes in him as a passer and is going to empower him, as I mentioned, as a passer, given the weapons they now have. I mean, Odell Beckham, who you mentioned, Odell Beckham doesn't have to be Giants Odell Beckham. He doesn't have to be what Cleveland needed him to be. All he has to be is functional, quite honestly. Like, I mean, you saw some of that with the Rams, where it's like, yo, just go play off of Cooper Kupp. And he was doing big things toward the end of the season and obviously in the Super Bowl before he got hurt. So Odell Beckham just has to be decent. And what is Odell Beckham's version of decent? That might be pretty good. This kid, Zay Flowers, is the truth. I know he's a rookie. I love Zay Flowers. They got two, like, incredible tight ends, and likely, and obviously Andrews. So it's all set up for Lamar Jackson to succeed. And at the end of the day, I'm going to always, again, sorry, Ryan, I'm always bet on Baltimore. That's just me.
It's all good. It's all good. Everybody has that team that they feel that way for.
I feel that way for the Steelers though too. Real talk. I mean, I think historically, obviously, Baltimore, the Ravens are not what the Steelers are in terms of just NFL history and over decades and decades of sustained excellence. But I just think that both those organizations, and it's why it's such a great rivalry, have so much in common in terms of this is the way we do things from a culture standpoint, from a business model standpoint, from an identity standpoint. It's like, this is the way that we do things here in this organization. And no matter who comes and goes, the results are still the same. Or as your man Mike Tomlin would say, the standard is the standard in both those places.
That's why the rivalry is the way it is.
It's not because they are wildly different. It's because they're so alike that makes the rivalry, to your point. And it's going to be a fascinating thing to see what happens with Lamar in this brand new offense. I think that defense is a little softer than what it's been in past editions in Baltimore. And with this change in offense, somebody's got to finish last in that mighty AFC North. It's going to be those Baltimore Ravens.
You got them last.
Well, somebody's got to come in fourth place, right? That's the team that's going to do it.
You mean like 8-9 last? What do we say last?
It's such a rugged division, but again, I guess you could say that about 3 of the 4 AFC divisions. But I think that you're going to have a fourth place team coming in around 8 and 9. Yeah.
Okay. Interesting. So you in on Cleveland then?
I wouldn't say I'm in on them. The Bengals remain number 1. Pittsburgh and Cleveland, tough to call who's going to break out between those two. But I think it's going to be Baltimore. Like I say, it's not a knock necessarily. It's just a rugged division. Now, I'll tell you what. You've gotten me at least over the moon in anticipation of pro football, as though I weren't already over my skis in excitement for it. But tell us right now about your new venture, Inflection Point. Sounds pretty cool.
Yeah, my company is Inflection Point Entertainment. We're a multimedia company. We create content across all genres and platforms and mediums. We make feature films, we make documentaries, we make scripted television, and we make audio content. And most recently, we announced a partnership with iHeartMedia, iHeart Podcast for the Inflection Network. And it's just another opportunity for me to tell stories. At my core, I'm a storyteller. I've always been a storyteller. In whatever form that takes. I feel like every time I'm giving my take and my opinion on a talk show, that's an opportunity to tell a story, or I'm crafting a story. If as a reporter, I'm storytelling, whether that's on air or whether that's with the written word. And so in the podcast space, I've always wanted to tell stories. I want to share my platform with others and give others opportunities to tell their stories their way. So we're going to have a variety of options. And it's going to be a reflection of me. I'm not one thing. I'm not just a sports guy. I have a lot of interests. I have a lot of perspective, a lot of passions. And so the podcast network is going to be a reflection of me in that regard. We have a Dynasty podcast coming out. That's why I kept referencing Dynasty, called the Dynasty Exchange. So we got a lot of range when it comes to our offerings. We have a story of, podcast, I beg your pardon, resiliency and, recovering from substance abuse or personal struggles or professional adversity. And then on the other hand, we got fantasy football. You know what I mean? So we got a nice range. But the through line through all those things is I love stories. The point at which I'm attracted to stories is the point of change. I think that's when it really gets good. And that's the inspiration behind the name of the company is the Inflection Point. It's Inflection Point Entertainment, because Inflection Points is when the story really gets fun.
Oh, that's awesome, man. I look forward to to catching your podcast, just any
you.
media that you guys put out. I already enjoy, you know, Brother from Another and everything else that you're
Thanks.
doing. So one last thing that we like to talk about, you know, this is a comeback story. This is a comeback podcast that we talked about. We talked about football coming back this season. We want to ask you, who do you think should be somebody that we should feature next on our show?
There's not enough storytelling when you're in the thick of it.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of times it's after the fact and the comeback is complete.
Yeah.
We tell the story of the comeback. Or people like to tell their stories once they get to the other side. I would love to hear more from people who are in the midst of it, because that's where people need the inspiration. Because so many people are at this inflection point that I'm talking about in their life and in their career. So many people are at a point where they need hope that there's better for me on the other side of this struggle. But they also need to know that they're not alone in that struggle. So the more that we can talk to people who haven't figured it all out, who haven't slayed the dragon, who haven't scaled the mountain, who haven't staged this comeback, to me, that's what people need to hear more, is that, hey, you're not alone in this journey, but you're right where you're supposed to be.
Obviously, you just stated your case with your storytelling with me and Shazier here. Hope everybody is checking you out on Brother from Another on Peacock, and best wishes with Inflection Point Entertainment. All great stuff, and thanks for the time today, man.
Yeah, thank
Ryan
you,
Double D, I appreciate you both. Thank you so much. All the best to you as well. Thank you.
Appreciate you.
Don't call it a comeback.
Thanks again to Michael for joining us today. And next up for us, we're talking Damar Hamlin's comeback and taking a look at one particular big-time matchup from college football's opening week. Time for some other comeback stories in the news we need to give a look at this week. This is the Check Down. Shazier, we're going to give each other one comeback story from the news this week. 30 seconds on the clock to break it down. Are you all set to roll here, 5-0?
Let's go.
All right. Like I say, Damar Hamlin has made the Bills' 53-man roster for the season. How does that news make you feel?
So honestly, I'm just extremely excited to see Damar Hamlin back out there playing football, especially because what he's went through is very close to my heart. He's from Pittsburgh. So to see Damar back out there playing the game that he loves, I think it's just amazing that he's back out there with the Bills. And they're a championship contending team. So I think he can be an asset to that team and an asset to that secondary. So I'm really excited that he's back.
Yeah, good for him being back out there. If you would have said 6 months ago that he was going to be back playing football, I think you would have gotten a lot of crazy looks. So good for him that he's back.
Well, it's my turn now. So the Buckeyes open the season with the road game in, you know, very, very tough Bloomington, Indiana. So do you think that there's any chance that they can lose to your Hoosiers?
It's funny you say very, very tough. That's not, we must be talking about two different Bloomington, Indianas, because the one that I matriculated at rolled out the red carpet for the powerhouse teams more often than not, at least. I just think it's very cruel. I think it's bully kind of, you know, a lot of talk about bully ball this year in the NFL. This is bully stuff out of Ohio State. Can't we Hoosiers at least have a couple of weeks to delude ourselves into thinking that maybe we're going to go to the Rose Bowl? Nope, not this year. Ohio State's got to come beat us by 120 points. Congratulations in advance, Shazier.
Hey, so since you don't like that we're playing each other early, how about we make a friendly wager? All right?
All right.
We talked earlier in the production meeting. You said that you don't think Ohio State is going to win 10 games.
No, I said they're not going to win 11 games. They'll go under 10 and a half.
So, okay. So do you want to make $100 bet that Ohio State wins 10 and a half games or more?
Well, we already know they're going to lose to Michigan. So now they can't lose any games before that one. So yeah, I'll take that action.
All right, then we can make another wager that Ohio State beats Michigan. You want to do that? So
let's keep our, this is what happens, Shazier. See, your Ohio State guys, they start looking ahead to national titles, and then Jim Harbaugh gets them. This is what you can't do. Focus on the Hoosiers, take care of that, and then we can talk about future bets. How about that?
All right, well, we'll see what happens, and we'll talk about this after we beat the Hoosiers, but this is up to you to finish the show.
Okay, that's it for this episode of Don't Call It a Comeback.
Make sure to follow, rate, and review the show on wherever you're listening, and check us out on YouTube on the Wondery channel. And make sure you hit the subscribe button so you don't miss an episode. See you all next week.
I've been waiting on this moment my whole life. Can't call it a comeback. Everybody to your feet, make arenas rise. Yeah, I'm saying from the left to right, we get it on tonight. We do it all, but we don't back down. Just give me one shot, one chance, I'ma take it. Fixing up the game, but these records I keep on breaking.